I know the title sounds unbelievable. Honestly, even now, it still feels unreal to say it out loud. But this actually happened to me, and I don't know how to process it, or what it means for my marriage. My father-in-law has always been difficult. He's one of those older men people describe as cranky or set in his ways. He makes inappropriate jokes, rude comments, and says things that make everyone uncomfortable. From the very beginning, my husband warned me about him and told me the best strategy was to ignore it. So that's what I did. I told myself he was from another generation. I told myself he didn't really mean it. I told myself keeping the peace was easier than confronting him. And for a long time, that worked. Until it didn't. A few weeks ago, my father-in-law injured his leg. It wasn't life-threatening, but it made it hard for him to move around his house. He still could walk, just not very well. My husband was busy with work, and without really thinking it through, I offered to stay with my father-in-law for a few days to help him out. At the time, it felt like the right thing to do. I was helping him with meals, chores, and making sure he didn't strain himself too much. It wasn't exactly pleasant, but nothing seemed dangerous. Uncomfortable, sure. Awkward, absolutely. But manageable. Then, a couple nights ago, everything changed. We got into an argument. A stupid one. The doctor had told him very clearly not to eat or drink certain things while he was recovering. He ignored that advice completely. I reminded him, calmly at first, that he shouldn't be doing that. That's when he snapped. He started yelling. Not just raising his voice, screaming. "Don't talk back to me, girl. I can do whatever I want in my house." The tone alone terrified me. I immediately realized this was escalating, and I didn't want any part of it. I apologized, even though I didn't think I was wrong, and tried to leave the room. I didn't get the chance. He got up from his chair and rushed toward me. In that moment, everything went cold. Yes, he's an older man. Yes, his leg was injured. But he's still very tall, over 6 feet, and I'm a small woman, barely over 5 feet and under 100 pounds. I knew instantly that if he got hold of me, I wouldn't be able to fight him off. And he did get hold of me. He grabbed me and restrained me before I could react. I froze. My body locked up. I was terrified. My mind was screaming at me to run, but my body just wouldn't respond fast enough. He forced me down and physically assaulted me. I don't want to describe it in graphic detail, but it was violent, humiliating, and terrifying. He was hitting me while yelling at me, treating me like I was a child being punished. I kept apologizing. I kept crying. I was genuinely afraid that if I resisted, it would get worse. I wasn't thinking logically. I was thinking, please just let this end. Eventually, after what felt like forever, he stopped and let me go. I thought it was over. I was wrong. He then ordered me to stand facing the wall. I knew, logically, that I might be able to run. But fear had completely taken over. I was scared that if I tried, he'd grab me again. I was shaking, in pain, humiliated, and not thinking clearly at all. So I did what he told me. After some time, he finally said I could leave. I ran to my room, locked the door, and immediately called my husband. As soon as I heard his voice, everything I'd been holding in came out. I was crying, shaking, trying to explain what had just happened. I felt powerless, violated, and completely overwhelmed. His reaction is something I will never forget. He laughed. Not loudly, more like a chuckle, and said, "Oh yeah, he used to spank us growing up." I thought I must have misunderstood him. I tried again. I explained that this wasn't a child being disciplined. That I'm an adult. That his father physically assaulted me. That I was terrified. He brushed it off. "Well, that sucks," he said. "But you knew what he was like. He's not really all there. You should just try to forget it." He's just a crazy old man. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I kept trying to explain how serious this was. How unsafe I felt. How humiliated and scared I was. Eventually, after I wouldn't let it go, my husband said he would talk to his dad. But even then, it felt like he wasn't really taking it seriously. I told him I needed to leave. I asked him to come pick me up immediately. He said he couldn't. The earliest he could come was Monday. That meant I was expected to stay in the same house with the man who had just assaulted me, for several more days. When my husband did speak to his father, it didn't help. My father-in-law started smirking at me. He made comments under his breath. He implied that if I talked back again, it would happen again. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, doing whatever he told me, terrified of provoking him. And the worst part? My husband still didn't seem to understand why this was such a big deal. He kept saying, "It's just spanking." And that's when a terrifying thought hit me. If he doesn't see what's wrong with this, what would happen if we had children? After that call, I barely slept. Every sound in the house made me tense up. Every time I heard his footsteps, my heart started racing. I kept replaying what had happened over and over in my head, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong so fast. I felt trapped. I didn't feel safe confronting him. I didn't feel safe leaving the house alone. And I didn't feel supported by the one person who was supposed to protect me. I called my husband again, hoping that once he had time to think, he would understand. I tried explaining it differently. I told him how scared I was. I told him I didn't feel safe sleeping in the same house. He still minimized it. He said he had talked to his dad and told him not to do that again. As if this was some kind of misunderstanding. As if a warning was enough. Meanwhile, my father-in-law's behavior got worse. He didn't apologize. He didn't act embarrassed. He acted amused. He would smirk when we crossed paths. He made subtle comments implying that I deserved what happened. A few times, he hinted that if I acted up again, he could repeat it. He never said it outright, but he didn't have to. The message was clear. I stayed quiet. I stayed compliant. I did everything I could to avoid setting him off again. I felt like I was living in constant fear, counting the hours until I could leave. At that point, people might wonder why I didn't just call the police. The truth is, in that moment, my mind wasn't clear. The first thing I thought to do was call my husband. When he brushed it off, everything felt confusing. I started doubting myself. I started wondering if I was overreacting. And by the time I realized how serious it was, I felt scared and intimidated about escalating it further. I know now that fear and shock can completely shut down rational thinking. I begged my husband to come sooner. He said the earliest he could manage was Sunday. That was better than Monday, but it still meant I had to stay there longer than I felt safe. Desperate, I reached out to a friend. I didn't tell her every detail, I was too embarrassed, but I told her enough for her to understand that I needed help. She asked her boyfriend if he could drive, and together they agreed to come get me the next day. That was the first moment I felt even a small sense of relief. The night before they arrived was unbearable. I barely slept at all. I stayed locked in my room, listening, waiting, terrified that my father-in-law would come to the door. The next morning, when my friend finally pulled up, I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my things and left. The moment I was in the car, the tension I'd been holding inside finally broke. I started crying. Not just because of what had happened, but because I was finally safe. Once I was away, I told my friend everything. She was horrified. She helped me document what had happened. She took photos of the injuries. She encouraged me to save my messages with my husband, especially the ones where he acknowledged that his father had assaulted me and that he had told him to stop. For the first time, someone treated this the way it deserved to be treated. As for my husband, we spoke again on the phone. He said he was coming back on Sunday and that we would talk everything through. He still seemed to think this was something that could be smoothed over with conversation. But I didn't feel the same anymore. Something had shifted. I realized that the most frightening part of all of this wasn't just what his father had done, it was my husband's reaction afterward. His lack of urgency. His lack of outrage. His willingness to leave me in a dangerous situation. I started asking myself hard questions. If this is how he reacts when I'm hurt. If this is how he responds when I'm scared. If this is what he's willing to excuse. What kind of partner is he really? And more importantly, what kind of future would that create? Being away from that house gave me space to think. For the first time since everything happened, I wasn't in survival mode. I wasn't just reacting. I could finally sit with my thoughts, and they scared me almost as much as what had already happened. I kept replaying my husband's reaction in my head. Not anger. Not concern. Not urgency. Just dismissal. He laughed at first. Then he minimized it. Then he framed it as something unfortunate, but not serious. Something I should get over. Something that didn't require immediate action. And I couldn't stop thinking about one thing. If this had happened to a stranger. If this had happened to a friend. If this had happened to our future daughter. Would he still think it was kind of funny? The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about his father. This was about boundaries. This was about safety. This was about whether my pain mattered. I started noticing patterns I had ignored before. How often my feelings were minimized. How quickly I was expected to move on. How easily other people's behavior was excused, as long as it didn't inconvenience him. I also thought about the future. What happens during holidays? What happens during visits? What happens if we have kids? Would I ever feel safe leaving them alone with his father? And if I wasn't comfortable with that, would my husband support me, or would he dismiss that too? That question terrified me. Because I realized something important. Trust isn't just about love. It's about protection. And in that moment, I didn't feel protected. I didn't feel like my husband was on my side. I felt like he was more concerned with keeping the peace than keeping me safe. When he comes back, we're supposed to talk. But I don't know what there is left to explain. I don't know how you explain fear to someone who refuses to acknowledge it. I don't know how you rebuild trust with someone who didn't act when it mattered most. And I don't know how you stay in a relationship where your safety is treated like an inconvenience. Right now, I'm staying with my friend. I'm safe. I'm supported. And for the first time since this happened, I'm starting to believe that maybe listening to my instincts isn't overreacting. Maybe it's survival. I don't know what decision I'll make yet. But I do know this. What happened wasn't okay. Laughing it off wasn't okay. And pretending it didn't matter isn't okay either. And no matter what happens next, I can't unsee that.